Hi, my name's Lizzie, and I wanted to share about um, spiritual practices, spirituality, spiritual community, because this theme's coming up a lot lately between conversations with clients or thinking about my own experience, and I suppose that made me want to share a bit about my own experience and how I think there's something about the kind of spiritual community and those sorts of spiritual self-help books that can be a bit like more of the same. And I don't know if it's that we interpret it wrong or just how it is, but what can happen is we then take the practices and use it to reject ourselves again. So we're doing more of the same. That was certainly my experience. So I really got into a lot of different books and spiritual practices and went to all the different groups and really got involved in it. And in some ways it was very lovely because I met some lovely people, but in other ways it was actually really painful because it made me feel that I was even more inadequate than I already thought I was. So I'd found even more reason to reject myself. I wasn't spiritual enough, I wasn't awakened enough, I wasn't at peace enough, I was suffering from, have feelings like anger, jealousy, hate, all those kind of feelings, or anxiety, and somehow I decided that meant therefore I wasn't spiritual. I didn't realise, and I'd never read or never experienced anyone saying that being spiritual, whatever that means, I don't even know what it means, but I don't know, being loved, loving, being whole is making peace with all the parts of ourselves. Now I know that you'd hear things like people saying, look into the mirror, tell yourself you love yourself, I love you, that kind of thing. But what really is that? What is loving ourselves? And I've come to experience from my own experience now that is actually making space for all those parts. The hate, the jealousy, the anger, the anxiety, the not good enough, all of the shame, all of those parts, holding space for them, going towards them. And another thing that happens in the spiritual community is quite a lot of the whole don't think negative thoughts, only think positive thoughts. Only raise your vibration, get it to a really high level, keep away from anyone who hasn't got that high level and might, they seem destructive in some way, and they're labelled as toxic. And in a way it's all like anti-life in a way. It's kind of, I see that now, how I just reinforced more of what I was doing. I became even more fearful, more judgmental, keeping away from more people, making my life even more insular. And, this is not a judgment on that. This is more just a sharing of how, for me, that really tripped me up. That made me feel, very bad about myself. And I've since come to learn, it took a long time, that the homecoming is literally coming back to myself, to the things that I'd tried to reject, to the dark side, to the negative parts, all the bits I wanted to shut off. I mean, if there is such a thing as God and love, then what it would just say, we only want the happy, loving people. No, I think it would be wanting all of that. Why is some parts not good enough and the other parts are? And so it's finding, for me, it was going towards those parts, being with those strong feelings of terror or not good enough or whatever those parts, those feelings were, and sitting with them and allowing them. We can try the whole brushing it aside, and I did that, and pretend it's not happening, or just, think positive, but it's still there. It just follows us, they don't die, they just get sort of buried alive, and they're still there. And so it's about actually turning towards it And actually when we turn towards it, we start to see how it's not what we thought it was. That they're not so dark, that they're not so bad. We make friends with them, and if we're making friends with them, we're making friends with the world ultimately, which is kind of, that is embracing of life and spirit, of being whole again. And I'm not saying it just happens in an instant, maybe for some people, but that's definitely not the case for me. But that for me has been a big shift and a realisation I didn't get back then, that I just thought I kind of had to be a certain way and think a certain way. And that's the other thing with spirituality. A lot of the spiritual practices are very, even though they say they're anti sort of thinking, it's still sort of getting caught up in stories and trying to rethink your mind for the story. But ultimately, quite often, it's actually traumatised people that are attracted to that spiritual side, because ultimately we want to escape pain. That's what it was for me. I went towards it so that I no longer had to feel pain. And I didn't realise that for me it was actually about going towards the pain and making peace with the pain, and it's, the body is cool for me to come back to the body. Like I was in my head, and again this is common for people that are traumatised, whether that's bullying, a big trauma, or PTSD. What tends to happen is those emotions are too big for us when we were young, or there was not anyone there to hold us, to enable us to know it's okay to feel those feelings. So in time we just detach from the body almost and go into the head. And so those people were very sort of usually good at thinking, being analytical, asking a lot of questions. And so the spiritual world quite often is sometimes a bit more of the same. And actually now what a lot of the trauma books are talking about, the really sort of advanced stuff, is that saying how so much of this is about coming back to the body, helping that person, enable them to start processing those very big emotions and start basically coming back into the body. And when one starts to do that, you start to become, well, it's like becoming whole again. You start to feel more grounded, you realise you have more capacity to even feel even more of those feelings. So yeah, I think that's a very different approach to what can happen in the spiritual community. And I do think it's innocent, but somehow it's funny how, I suppose that's how it works, you know, what we want, there's that opposite in it always. But so the sort of spiritual community is about loving, and then what's happening is many of us were sort of faking it and hating ourselves even more and feeling horrendous because we weren't loving enough, you know. And how different is that if you sort of let yourself know, you know, loving is allowing it all, the hate, the anger, the pain, the anxiety, the not good enough, making space for it. And there are ways to do that. There's lots of different techniques, but I don't want to talk about it in this video because then it will go on for hours. But yeah, I just wanted to share that really. And I suppose what I've realised is where I've learnt to do that and gone back to my body and process those, or be with those dark, negative sides, I'm more tolerant of the world, and I'm more at peace with myself, and I'm more loving, and I'm more able to feel feelings, and to realise that all feelings are entitled to space and a place for them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with with anger, with hate, with jealousy. And I think somewhere down the line we'd labelled them as bad and wrong, and every time we do that they just get held there. They're given even more power, because the more we resist something, the more it persists. So yeah, I hope that may help you. Okay, bye.